Endeavor, to exert oneself, to do or affect something, to make effort, strive. Welcome back to Drop Dice. I'm Chris. Today happens to be January 1st. It's the new year, so first off, Happy New Year to everybody, and I just want to talk about some stuff that's going on before we get too far into Endeavor and talking about my latest project. Today I was able to play in a Copper Jackals one-shot, which was a White Room playtest of the new mechanics for the Copper Jackals supplement that will be coming out, which is definitely looking really cool. To me, I think of it as a really nice alternative to introduce some things like magical weapons and things like that really grow with your character and are about player customization. At least that's the strength of each one of them, is about the equivalent of a magic weapon, but with at the same time not taking things away from magic weapons. In fact, I think it makes it feel even cooler when you do end up getting a magic weapon later on in the game, because it's now not just, oh, we found this +1 sword of doom. It's +1 sword called Doombringer that was carried by the Knight of Philanthropy, that sort of thing. And it really kind of plays and shows that you can be strong without magic items. Your magic items can be more potent, more story-driven. I think it was a really cool thing. That was one of the things we discovered. The other thing I wanted to mention was A Point of Inspiration has launched their website, and their second project has been completed, which is called Grimdark. Excellent addition to your D&D games, which basically adds fairy tale elements and these grim, darker stories and things like that. So let's kind of talk about Endeavor. As you guys can see, I'm trying to step up my game a little bit on these little shorter videos and add some music to the background. Let's switch screens here. So this is the universe. I've switched over to player mode so you guys can see what the players see. As you can tell, before we had 27 planets. I've narrowed it down a little bit. That's because this is a known sector map that they were given by their shipyards when they bought their ship, the Endeavor. I've opened up all the tabs here. Let's kind of talk about where the players are going to start. The place that I'm going to start them is actually called Flumis, formerly known as Woth. Woth was originally a planet that just made its money and its resources off of farming, agriculture, and hydroponics specifically. It is an oceanic world with a rigid culture that's based in the line of believing that hard work pays off kind of deal. However, the imperial line of Tiberius, which is a empire that controls a couple different planets around the area, has decided to invade, and because of that, what's ending up happening is the Tiberian soldiers are patrolling the planet and picking up anybody who opposes the new government and selling the propaganda of the imperial line. So there's kind of a little bit of shifting alliances and hostility on both sides for the planet here. So Poseidon's Rest is the new name for the spaceport that was formerly known as Tula, and that's how the players will know is that it recently had been taken over, and that they're here to help someone on the planet with a job, which we'll get into a little bit more when we talk about adventure design. I don't want to reveal too much because we're going to have our session 0 coming up soon on the 12th, I believe. Let me just double check that real quick here. The 12th, yeah. So the cool thing about this is that this was all done with the random planet generation. It gave me a very neat idea of where to start and give an idea. And so some of the sites here, we've got the forest, which is kind of this huge, massive kelp bed that's overgrown that unfortunately is not stuff that they can use for their hydroponics. It's just stuff that they have to clear out and they have to fight against because kelp will spread. The Kirov is an underwater ruins of mysterious origins, which I got the idea of those from. There's a set of runes that are outside of Japan that are underwater that nobody really understands exactly how they were put together, or if it was done above ground and then for some reason like a shifting tectonic plate caused them to go underwater, or whatever the case may be. They're just kind of a confusing idea, and there's some people that believe in that it's possible that it may be like an alien structure that doesn't belong on Earth because the engineering doesn't match up. That's kind of the inspiration for the Kirov. It's going to be this just strange underwater building that you can clearly see when you're on the ocean looking down into the clear water, because it's it's a freshwater ocean. It's a very clean planet as well. And then it's also got the farming colonies, which is kind of its main draw. And the players are going to find out that not everything is PG on this planet like it appears. Let's talk about some of the other cool planets around here. So Cygnus Prime is the main planet that the Imperial line of Tiberius accepts people into because they want to limit the amount of interaction that people have with them because they're a little xenophobic. So that happens to be where most people are accepted into the planet as far as like finding out different cultures and trades and things like that. And the cool thing about the Imperial line of Tiberius is they actually trace their lineage, or at least they claim to trace their lineage back to Dr. Tiberius Crone, the man who invented the spike drive, or at least just kind of perfected that technology. So they claim to be a remnant of that same family that, according to them, Dr. Tiberius gained an immense amount of wealth and bought a planet and started the Imperial line, and that they are the remnants of it. The current ruler is Marcus Tiberius and his Democratic Council, which are a little bit opposed against each other. They're actually going to be separate factions for when I take my faction turn. The other thing that's kind of cool about the Imperial line is I took a lot of influence from Roman Empire, which is why the Emperor is a little bit opposed to the Democratic Council. But that's going to even flow into the way that the troops are designed. They're going to have like these futuristic Spartan warrior kind of look to them. They'll have shields, they'll attack in phalanx. They use a blaster rifle that's been modified to look like a spear that they can basically shield up and then throw the spear over and just blast people, that sort of thing. So they're definitely a threat on the battlefield, and they are a very militant type group. Another good militant group to know is actually one of the alien species I added, or the alien species that I had added to the universe, which was the Crick. It's an alien species. You guys can kind of see the picture here. I had this insectoid picture race thing here floating around, and I thought that was super cool, so I wanted to use it for them. And basically they are aliens are done with lenses, basically how you should portray them. Traditional and wrath is what I ended up with. So they're very tradition-based people that have these long, outstanding habits and things like that they really push forward and try and bring into everything. And because of that, they are very kind of I guess I don't want to say traditional, but I guess that's the best word for it. They have a lot of steep traditions is basically what I'm getting at. But the other thing that they have is wrath, which was kind of cool because when I go to their planet, which is right here, Criskin, hatred is one of the world's tags in Warlords. So that kind of peppered how the species actually works. And so what I thought was, let's do it kind of like a Nigerian-like insectoid race that has these different factions and warlords that have been feuding against each other for centuries. And the one place that is kind of free of this hatred and constant war is Pshaka, which is the spaceport. Pshaka is kind of a big mud pile. I envision like a fire ant colony almost that's piled up hundreds of miles high, and there's like this big natural form tunnel that goes down and these little terraces, and that ships land along the terraces. But inside is the inner city, which is made of crystalline structures that give off a soft natural light. And that the city itself would be a very beautiful place if it wasn't full of all these creatures that have a hatred for humans, mainly due to the Imperial line of Tiberius trying to pick fights and conquer their planet, because the line has just been really aggressive in the past about 30 years or so. And that may be due to the leadership of Marcus, actually. Not much is known about the planet other than Pshaka, because that is one of the few places that actually people were able to make planet-side contact and that there were released reports of. So there's a lot of kind of hidden stuff about that planet that players can explore. Another interesting planet is actually Elysium, which is the planet that actually has the Imperial line of Tiberius housed on it. It's another xenophobic planet with bubble cities, and it's got a preceptor archive, and so they value intelligence and learning and things like that. But the cool thing about it is the biosphere is actually a paradise planet. So I've got this kind of really to kind of reinforce that Roman Empire theme. If you go to Elysium, everything is the absolute perfection of aristocratic Roman influence. And then if you go to, let's say, Cygnus Prime is kind of where your average person lives. And then if you were to go to Flumis, which is the planet that they're going to start on, which was formerly Woth, it's going to be the poorest of poor. But they haven't been in the Empire long enough to really see what's going to be the problem with being the poorest of the poor. Definitely kind of a fun thing to play up. And then, let's see here, another kind of cool one to add here is Billerica, which is got an Indian feel to it. It's got the Psy shipyards, or the Sing shipyards rather, and the Overwatch Corporation, which Overwatch owns most of the workshops and things like that. But the cool thing to me is Patharde, the city here. Patharde is kind of a huge, massive, just workshop almost. It has channels that go through the city, and they're inside these channels, instead of being like water like a Venice, it's actually slurry and chemical waste from the plants, and the place just smells horrible. It smells like sweat, chemicals, and just feels like heat all the time. But the shipyard constantly pumps out cheap, overproduced ships, which the Imperial line is more than happy to buy their fighters from them. So that's what's keeping the Sign shipyards in business at this point. Another contending shipyard is actually over on Foshan. Foshan, I named it for the city that the Ip Man originally was in. It was a popular city when martial arts was kind of the gentlemanly thing to do in China. And Foshan was kind of about the southern style of martial arts, and it was a bunch of schools competing, and I kind of had this idea of a mix of ease and well-being, because that's how the people live there. This idea that, things would go the way they're intended to. So the planet itself is a very relaxed planet. And Qingdao is the spaceport, which is actually a rather small spaceport, but it does have a synchronized orbit with the planet. It's actually a satellite that goes over the planet, and it's synchronized with the orbit. And what it uses is a large orbital elevator to travel between the planet and the planet side of the city and the orbital side of the city, which I got this idea from Nelson's space elevator idea, so that map will probably get used at some point, because I thought it was definitely cool to use something like that, have a planet space elevator. Now the other thing is the planet takes a strong influence from its tech level, and it's become more of a hive world with little more than shipping yards and a major trade hub, which is kind of interesting and different from the Tiberius line planets, which are trying to de-emphasize their technology and go with a more traditional look, and integrating their higher technology with a more traditional feel. Definitely kind of a cool, different feel than that one. We already talked about Criskin. Kurgan is a desert planet, and it's also a pilgrimage site. And it definitely has one of the coolest religions that I thought of inside here, and this is just one of them that I named. The Amar Omsk is the spiritual site of the neo-fundamentalist Eastern Orthodox Amish religion. It is much like the Amish faith that we understand inside the real world, but they believe that any technology beyond the Neolithic period of Terra would be considered ungodly. So they don't allow technology of anything higher than 0 outside of Ryazan's limits, and that they are much like the Amish people generally are, as a very nice and welcoming and understanding people, but you don't want to make them mad or doubt their faith or insult their faith, which I thought was kind of fun to have something kind of strange going on inside there, and I think there'll probably be a faction if the players take interest in that. You have the Amar Umsk, and then the Temple of Silent Contemplation, and the Kurnikov Palace, which used to belong to the previous rulers of the planet before the neo-fundamentalist Eastern Orthodox Amish religion kind of took over the planet. And the cool thing about this one is the Ryazan is actually a satellite that stays in orbit. It's not in synchronous or anything like that, but a shuttle is the only thing that's allowed to enter the planet's atmosphere. Should you be caught planet side, the offense is execution, or it's an executionable offense to be caught with a higher tech level than 0 on the planet. Definitely kind of a cool thing to explore. Might be a good background for somebody to be one of these Amish that didn't return home after his time out. Another one that I wanted to point out here was Santo Petar. This is kind of a cool one. It's a prison planet, basically kind of taking influence from what Australia was originally created by the imperial line of Britain to just kind of house their criminals. But the other thing is that there's actually an outpost here, and people are allowed to work off their debts. So I took a little bit from Dead Man Wonderland and kind of added this idea that they work on a point system, and that their points can buy them vac suits and filtration systems and food and things like that. And should they not earn enough points to keep themselves alive, they would die a painful, terrible poison type related death. It's definitely kind of a neat planet. In fact, I just realized that there is a problem here. The biosphere remnants is kind of where they kind of go and look. It's got the Badlands feel, but this breathable atmosphere should be changed to a different kind of atmosphere, which I'll change after this. And the style of the planet actually really reflects that hydraulic despotism, which is kind of a neat thing that the game includes inside there. So those are kind of the big major planets. Another one of interest would be Gansu. Most of the psionics are taught on spaceships, so that if there's any sort of problems, a psionic loses control and accidentally rips a hole in a starship, it only kills other psionics. So people believe that to be a greater way to teach psionics and keep the general populace safe. There's not necessarily a fear of psionics, but almost an untrustingness to them, to psionics by the general sector itself. The only exception to that is Gansu, which actually has the Atreides Psionics Academy, allowing psionics to train on a planet-side setting. But the planet itself is largely hostile and lifeless, with the exception of the Academy and the Weifeng Marketplace, which the Weifeng Marketplace I kind of thought about like Diagon Alley, but for psionicists kind of deal. So maybe it would be kind of a cool place, even if you were part of one of these big Academy ships, that you would still go to the Weifeng Marketplace to pick up things that you need and things like that. Definitely kind of a neat thing. And then the last one that I wanted to mention was Ridley, which is also another exception to the psionic thing, because they worship psionics, and they have a theocracy in place which reinforces it. And there's a police state which kind of really enforces these over-the-top psionic worshipping type tendencies. But the other thing that's kind of cool is the city was originally a small spaceport that kind of got built up, and due to the growing need for landing spaces on the planet, the buildings actually do double duty as landing platforms. And because people were concerned about security and things like that, the city has expanded into a network of bridges and elevators to keep unwanted guests from buildings they don't belong in. That also happens to be the home of the West End Hotel, which is the greatest, like 6-star even, hotel of the universe here, and the Great Scion Temple, where they worship psionics in general. It would be considered a good refuge if you just wanted to retire as a scion and live a life of luxury, things like that. The way that I'm seeing it is the planet has a little bit of a caste system going on. So that is pretty much the universe in a nutshell. The Endeavour was kind of cool to put together. It's actually going to be released by Feilong Industries. the players will have the ability to pay down their costs. For now, the base cost is going to be 800,000, and depending on what they get for a business role, it may change what their interest rate is going to be, which I'll figure out with them once they start building their characters. And they'll have to pay down their leasing fees to Fei Long Industries every month, or else they might get bounty hunters coming after them, that sort of thing. And so some of the amenities the ship has is sand thrower, multifocal lasers, atmospheric configuration so that it can land, and it will land in any sort of planetary atmosphere, to include water, so long as the place that they're landing can support their mass. So kind of a cool thing there. They have 2 cargo spaces added to them, so they have 80,000 tons of cargo space. And they've got a fuel bunker, meaning that they can carry 2 fuel at once. They have fuel scoops and lifeboats, just in case the ship goes down. Fei Long Industries actually cares about their customers, so they provide lifeboats, whereas Sing Industries does not. They do not do lifeboats or anything like that. It's just kind of a weird difference between the two, but Sing also makes much cheaper ships, so that could be part of the reason. But that is pretty much where we're at with Endeavour. I've got the faction sheet kind of started, but I'm not going to really do too much with it until I get to my faction turn, which will be once they complete an adventure or a month in game has passed. I get to take a faction turn every time. And the way that I'm going to build my faction sheet is around the things that players immediately take interest in. That way my faction sheet is actually pointed at what players are interested in, rather than necessarily what I would want to share with the players and tell a story of. Because again, this is going to be more of a sandbox style game. Now, I wanted to mention that the map itself does look a little sparse. That's because we're on a player view. Keep in mind there's a lot of stuff that's hidden away on my GM view, which is more for me, and I may show you guys in the future. I just wanted to kind of put this up here so that you guys could have a good update. That's pretty much all I have for Endeavour today. I wanted to thank everybody for coming out here and seeing what we've got so far. And keep in mind the Session 0 is going to be on the 12th. And I'm hoping for a ton of fun from this system. It looks like a great time. If you guys can see my tabs at the top, I've been watching Swan Song. I have a lot of fun with that show. I think that this might be a good tool for me to kind of expand my repertoire as a GM. With that said, all I really want to say from here is I appreciate you guys tuning in for another year with Drop Dice. And as always, I will see you at the gaming table.